Every single person in this world has a story to share. Your story is your superpower, and it's unique to you. In sharing it with the world, you can impact millions of people. If you keep it to yourself, you are doing the world a disservice. This is Dela. I'm the host of Dela's Voice, and I help you share your superpower with the world.
Hello, and welcome to another Dela's Voice Sunday live talk show. As always, it is a privilege and an honor to have this platform where I can speak to incredible people every week and bring the stories to you to inform you, to inspire you, to motivate you for change, wellness, and recovery. Today's guest is totally aligned with my message. When I read my guest's bio, I felt like he was speaking my words, and I'm so excited to hear his story because he helps you tell your story in the most impactful way. He also believes that your story, your voice, is your superpower. So I'm super excited to have my guest today, Michel Neray. You would know Michel Neray if you know Mo Mondays, because he started Mo Mondays. Michel is an expert on how storytelling in life and in business can help elevate you to a whole new level. He's a coach, he's a consultant, and a professional speaker, also a host for his own show. So Michel's here today, and he's going to help us understand how telling your story inside out can totally change the way you impact the world. Michel has so much experience in helping businesses and companies around the globe, from Montreal to Moscow, from Israel to Iran, and I'm waiting to hear a little bit about all his travels. So, ladies and gentlemen, please share this talk with others so that they can also be inspired by today's guest, and help me welcome Michel Neray on Dela's Voice.
Hi, Dela.
Hello.
Oh, the applause. Wild applause. The crowd is going wild.
In fact, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
When I invited you on the show, I didn't know if you were going to say yes. I didn't know. But I just thought, you know what, I'm going to try. So I did. And you graciously said yes. And I'm super excited to have this conversation today because, as you heard me say, your words are my words. And this is the reason why I started Dela's Voice in the first place, because for a long time, Michel, I didn't have a voice and I didn't know how to tell my story. But the moment I started to tell my story is when I realized that by sharing my story, I was healing and I was allowing other people to take from the lessons I learned in my life. And then there was this hope. Because that's what happens, right? When people share their stories. And so I totally believe that your voice, your story is your superpower. So thank you for putting this out there.
Well, thank you. And I think the more people who do this kind of work, the better. I truly believe that By sharing our, I mean, this sounds like a little bit perhaps lofty and idealistic, but I truly do believe that by sharing our personal stories, we are taking individual steps toward world peace.
So elaborate on that a little bit, please, will you?
Well, when we hold the stories inside us, they get stuck and we have resentment and anger and all kinds of things that we end up taking out on other people. On the other hand, when we are free of our own story, because by sharing our story, we actually free ourselves of them. Not only, as you said in your introduction for yourself, not only do you heal yourself, but you help the world. And I truly believe that I'm from running Mo Mondays for, live shows for 9 years, pre-COVID in 16 cities across the country. What I saw was that when people shared their story from the heart, you still have to craft your story. You still have to have your audience in mind. You still have to have all kinds of skill in sharing and telling your story. But when you do share your story and you maintain that element of the heart, all the labels fall away. So man, woman, child, black, white, ethnic background, religious background, sexual orientation and preference, all of those things fall away. Because if you really share your story from your heart, all people hear is human story.
Yes, absolutely. And so this is also my belief deep down inside. I do believe that the reason for our differences is that we don't understand each other. And what we don't understand, it's the things that makes us appear different. And when we don't understand, we are fearful. Mm-hmm. And so by sharing our stories, when we see that deep down inside as human beings, we are connected because we feel the same feelings and we fear the same things and we have the same hopes and dreams and inspirations, then that the fear is gone. And so, of course, it's the way to peace in the world. And I thank you so much. This is so good. This is so good. This is a great conversation, Michel. So, okay, let's get to see how you got started. I mean, Mo Mondays, what a concept. How did it come about? For people who don't know what Mo Mondays is all about, I mean, I had the pleasure of being invited on Mo Mondays Waterloo, and I had a blast. But for people who don't know what it is, could you explain it a little bit, and then we'll go into how you thought of this ingenious idea?
Mo Mondays is a platform for people to share their stories, not to complain, not to whine, not to teach, not to preach, not to sell, but to share. And like I said earlier, when you share from the heart, from a genuine place of wanting to, this is what I learned from my experience. This is what I learned. And I put it out there for you to learn whatever it is that you need to learn in your life. Where people get stuck is they think they know their story, and therefore they don't think they need to, there's no benefit for them to share it. Or they know their story, they learn their story, and then they feel like everybody needs to learn this. And they become motivational speaker 101. And neither of those extremes are actually appropriate. What people realize when they do it kind of right, when they do it right and they approach it with the right mindset, what they realize is that there's always an extra layer to take off, another bit to unpack of their own story. There's always a little bit deeper than that you can dig into your own story so you can learn what it is that you need to learn from it. Oh, I know my story. Yes, you know the facts. You know what happened. But it's only when you dig a little bit deeper that you realize this is the benefit. This is the lesson. This is the insight that actually has been guiding me my entire life without my even knowing it. And if I could bring that to the surface, and if I could articulate it, not only do I learn it better myself, I become much more aware of who I am as a person and what makes me special, why I do what I do, why I do, how I do what I do, and all of those wonderful things. It's a great confidence that comes with, oh, this is why I do this. This is why I am this way. This is how I help other people. This is how I see the world in my unique way. There's great confidence in knowing who you are at that level. And you know the expression, you only truly learn something when you teach it to others. Well, we don't want you to teach it like training, but when you share it, that's when it becomes real for yourself.
Mm-hmm. So you created Mo Mondays so that people could have a platform to do that.
Yes.
And so what makes Mo Mondays different than, I don't know, other speaking platforms? Are there any other speaking platforms that's not as informal? I mean, it's so fun to be there, right? And I can just imagine that Mo Mondays in person would be a totally different experience. I got to do this online. So how is it different?
Well, it's different because when I really think about it, it's a reflection of my own personality, my own very eclectic personality. So I could go back and I'll take you back to when I'm 6 years old, but that's way too far back for this question. Let me just explain that I was a corporate marketing communications professional for many years. And I became known as the person that companies would come to help them discover, surface, and communicate their differentiation. What makes my company unique? And what I discovered was that if I really dig down deep enough to their core differentiation, there was always a personal story. Always. Behind every business is a personal story of a challenge or an obstacle that they wanted to overcome, and lo and behold, grew a business out of it. Now, it could be the business. Anyway, there are lots of things about that, but we're not going to do a branding session today.
Another day.
But at the core of their brand differentiation was always a person. And this struck me. And it also struck, and we're talking, Dela, now storytelling, everybody talks about storytelling. Talk brand story, this story, that story. We don't even know what story is anymore. Everybody talks about it. It's become a buzzword. It's become popular. But I was doing this in the late 90s.
Before it became a thing.
And it dawned on me that your story, the company, that personal story, is actually the most powerful vehicle that we have to communicate the corporate story. Okay. So put that aside for a minute. I am a musician. I studied stand-up comedy. I did all the things that people of our generation did, and I went to, these transformational courses where, it takes thousands of dollars and several weekends, and everybody has to cry, one of those. And I did that for many years. I was a professional speaker already, so I did, and a solopreneur, an entrepreneur, and I went to networking events, and they were so boring. Everybody says, "Here's my business card." I'll never forget the time that somebody went around the room handing out her business card, And then she went back around and she didn't even look into my eyes. She just handed me another business card. I said, but you already gave me one. Like, did you even say hello the first time?
That was networking, right?
Yeah. Horrible. Now, I'm not ragging on networking events. I think they're brilliant. They're great. You need them. But at the time, there were so many that were just about giving and getting business cards. And then you go home and you got the stack of business cards. What are you going to do with them? You file them in the waste paper bags. That's what, and who remembers them anyway? Anyway, that's a whole, don't get me started. So I was doing that. And I told you I was learning stand-up comedy. And in fact, I thought, if I could, and let me tell you, the stand-up comedy, I loved it. And I think there's so great catharsis in laughing and lightening up. And I think stand-up comedy is one, people don't realize this. Stand-up comedy is one of the most, or comedy in general is one of the most effective ways to get across a serious message.
Yes.
It's unbelievable. And we don't do enough of it. Anyway, so you can imagine, here I was, and I'd been doing all these different kind of events and really unhappy with all of them. Stand-up, especially the stand-up comedy that every week I'd go and I'd either in attendance or I'd get on stage. And at the end of the night, my wife and I would look at each other and we'd say, that was funny. Oh, what were we laughing at? I can't remember. It was like junk food or porn laughter. I don't know. It was like, it was empty calories. And so
not fulfilling.
Funny and good for you,
yes,
but not truly fulfilling. And I thought to myself, if I could put together my own event, I'd take a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of this and make it fun and entertaining, but also fulfilling.
Yes.
Also introspective. Also truly connective at a human level. But like I said, I didn't want to, it's not like you had to pay thousands of dollars and spend several weekends and everybody has to cry. I didn't want that, but I wanted an element of it. I wanted the real element of it. And I'll never forget. I was running out the house to do my first Mo Mondays. It was starting at 7:00 and it was 5 minutes to 7. I was going to be late for my first show. And my wife said, so, cause she's like, I didn't know I didn't know. She said, why are you doing this? Like, why are you all stressed out? Why are you doing this? Like, you don't need to do this. And she said, why are you doing this? And I said, I don't know. I just turned to her and I had this awareness, like, I don't know. It's just something that I need to do. And we did it for 3 months. We were on the second floor of a tea room, no lights, no stage, certainly no alcohol, no backdrop, no microphone, nothing. It was just tea and biscuits and 18 people in the audience, half of which were the serving staff, half of which were the speakers, and it was not very well, but it did grow from there. But in the first 3 months, I saw everything I never wanted to see again. I saw people practicing their sales pitch. I saw people whining. I saw people trying to be, hack motivational speaker 101. And that's when we started putting in rules. And I started challenging my professional speaker friends. I said, share a story that you've never shared before with your corporate audiences. Tell us something that really reveals something about you that we don't know. And I also invited people who were not professional storytellers, but I knew they had a powerful story to tell. And that is when the audiences started to grow. That and the fact that we were kicked out of the tea room because we weren't bringing enough people. So we had
to drink tea.
But yeah, right. Seriously. And then we moved to a jazz bar and and that's when I started putting in these rules. But what do they have in a jazz bar that they don't have in a tea room?
Alcohol?
For one.
I don't know what else.
Yeah. Well, like it was a jazz bar, real
Music,
sound.
yes.
Yeah,
yes.
real audio,
Of
real
course.
backdrop. It was a beautiful
Yes.
backdrop, a beautiful stage, real food, and real alcohol. You know, it's and like we packed the place.
Yes.
Packed the place. And again, I never intended to grow Mo Mondays beyond my own event, but we knew we were onto something. The audiences were thrilled to hear these. Where else could you hear these kinds of stories, but also in a format that was as much fun as it was human and engaging?
Yes. Yes.
And that was my intention right from the very, very beginning. I said, yeah, we bring these things, but it has to be fun. And, you know, my friend from Winnipeg called me up and she said, Michel, I've been watching what you're doing on Facebook and I want to do it here and you're going to help me. And I said, no, I'm not equipped to help anybody else. I'm having enough trouble. You know, it's enough work just doing it on my own. And she said, no, you're going to help me. This is a very good friend of mine. Stephanie Staples from Winnipeg, phenomenal storyteller, phenomenal speaker. And I said no, and she said yes, and I said no, and she said yes, and she said yes again. And I thought, oh, Stephanie, oh my God, all right, I'll do it. But if I help you, I'm going to build it in such a way that we can make it easier for other people to do this as well. And she said, absolutely. And I want to help you do that because really the world needs Mo Mondays. And so I started building in a whole infrastructure, a technology platform to make it easier for people from other cities. And I started saying, oh, somebody from Halifax wants to start, somebody from St. John wants to start, somebody from Ottawa wants to start. And then I got calls in the US, you know, people wanted to start. And that's literally how it grows. So it wasn't never my intention to grow it beyond my own. But clearly there was a need for this. Clearly this filled a gap in the market. When you think about people, you know, there are only a certain number of movies you could go to and loud bars you could go to where you can't hear other people anyway. What do you do for entertainment after a certain point that's fresh and meaningful, but also entertaining at the same time? So that's what Mo Mondays really was for me and for the people who came. And that's how Mo Mondays grew.
Great story. This is a great story. I think it's fun and it's meaningful, like you said. And so people who go to these events, who go to a Mo Mondays event, you know, that's what they're looking for. They're looking to get inspired. They're looking to leave feeling better than they came in. Mm-hmm. And so I'm sure you accomplished that. Michel, if you could think of one single story that you could, you know, single out as, oh, that was like the best ever. And what happened? Could you give us a quick scenario?
Well, no, I cannot think. That is totally unfair question.
It's unfair.
I cannot think of one. I can think of several. We feature some of the best ones. If you go to the Mo Mondays website at momondays.com or the YouTube channel, and you find it's not very well organized, but you find the playlist of featured. There are some really, really excellent. There's the woman in Toronto who you know, talked about being boy crazy and she was hilarious. She said, I came out of the womb, I saw a doctor, a man. I said, here, take me. She was hilarious. But she also talked about how that informed her life throughout her life and the choices that she made and how she's grown from that. I remember the story of the man who was abused as a child, but channeled that into a running career that is unbelievable and a heart as big as anything for people who have experienced trauma. I've heard story from a man from Afghanistan who, had a difficult childhood and, tried to run away from home multiple times, was ostracized by his own family, and for being, not strong enough. He was, his father said he was the weak one, and he remembers going to the river when he would run away and walking along the river, and he would find peace and tranquility and wisdom that he drew from the river. And at the end of the talk, he pulls a little stone out of his pocket, and he says, "This stone comes from that river." Like, mind-blowing stuff. I remember the story of the transgendered woman who grew up football player, but never quite felt right in her own skin. Talk about a transformation and empowering, and how courageous you have to be to take that step. And although she was talking about transitioning from a man to a woman, which probably very few people could actually identify with, but everybody in the room could identify with not feeling quite right in your own skin.
Yes.
And that, when I said earlier about all the labels fall away, I mean, she told it in such a beautiful and powerful way that everybody in the room was like, connects.
Goosebumps.
Yeah, so they're
I can tell you're just a little bit passionate about that. That the gentleman from Afghanistan who held that rock is my friend Ahmad Shadur, and
you know him,
and I know that story, and oh wow, Michel, you've been touched by all these stories, obviously. How have they changed you? First of all, you lost all your hair.
Oh, that happened a long time ago.
It's not because of the stories.
It's all the stories have changed me by making me more aware and more convinced of the power of story. When I told you, when I started it, I had a sense that this was important work to do, but I didn't know how important. I didn't know how pervasive it was. I didn't know. My mother was a Holocaust survivor, spent a year in Auschwitz. She ended up writing a book, speaking about her experiences. And educating the world on what happened to the best of her ability. And she lived till she was 87. She lived a very happy life after that. She absolutely had trauma to get over, but it was in the sharing of her story, I believe, that was probably the most healing thing for her. My father, born in Tehran, went to boarding school in France. His father was the head of he was the schoolmaster in Isfahan. And yeah, you did. You just right. Lots here.
That's crazy.
Crazy. My grandfather was the schoolmaster of the French Jewish school in Isfahan. My father, Jewish, raised in Iran, was sent to boarding school to France by his father, who was clearly very education-minded. And at the end of it, he felt more French than Iranian. Mm-hmm. And when the war broke out, when the Second World War broke out, he wanted to join the French army, but of course he wasn't French. And so the best he could do was join the French Foreign Legion. Now, I don't know if you know about the French Foreign Legion, but they were known for their roughness, their toughness. They emptied jails to fill the ranks of the French Foreign Legion. That was how they were going to get their freedom and their citizenship. My father was probably the most educated person, but he suffered incredibly. And in fact, I recently wrote a song about him called Stories in the Drawer, because after he passed away, we found all these medals and citations and a letter from General de Gaulle praising him of his work. And I started doing research. When we were kids, we'd say, "Dad, tell us stories from the war." And he said, "Well, I fired my gun twice. Once to clean it, once to kill a chicken so we can have something to eat for dinner. But that's it." I said, "Dad, this medal you got, you earned the bronze, no, the Palm Cross of Honor, courage. What did you do to that?" I said, "Well, I had to deliver, and because I could speak multiple languages, I became the walkie-talkie man, and I had to deliver a message from the French to the British on the other side, and I had to cross enemy lines to do it. So they gave me a medal." Well, 10 years after he passed away, my dad passed away at 65. Young. Very young. I believe it was eating away at him from the inside because he never shared the real story. After he passed away, we started doing real research on it, and, it was horrific. There was one battle, which is a famous or semi-famous battle that's actually written up, the Battle of Radicofani, where they got to this village, Radicofani in Italy, and all of a sudden they were being machine gunned from the enemy soldiers high up in the tower. And people were dying left and right. And they asked for 6 volunteers to scale the wall of the tower. And my dad was one of those 6 volunteers. And he climbed the wall, scaled the wall with ropes and pittons by hand, and, got to the top and tossed in the grenades, saved his regiment, but killed everybody there. And there was another story I read where, they were 200 troops where they captured 2,000 enemy soldiers. It's 10 to 1. They're like what he lived with and never talked about, never shared his story. I believe it ate away at him from the inside.
Yes. Today we're talking about PTSD and all these things, and we're more aware of them. But back then, a man would never admit that he was suffering. They just didn't do that.
No. It's funny. I was talking to some military experts, and they said, those who talk about them didn't live through them. Those who lived through them don't talk about them. Wow. So you asked me how it's changed me. I came to believe that the difference between my mother and my father, my mother's long life and my father's short-lived life, was almost entirely due to their ability, willingness, and permission to share their story.
Yeah. Wow. So this is what I'm thinking. You go through all this period of running Mo Mondays and hearing all these different people's stories. And even though before you even started that, you were already a believer in the power of storytelling and stories. But I feel like this period totally got you prepared for the next step in your life, which is, going around the world and helping people really design the perfect way of telling their story inside out, as you call it. So tell us a little bit about that. So what does it mean to an inside out story? What is that?
And thank you for asking that, because it really is the extension of the question you asked me earlier, which is how has it changed me? I became more committed than ever to help people share their story, craft and share their story in the most effective way. So, let's be honest. There are many stories at Mo Mondays even that are not told extremely well. They're either told, as I said earlier, they're either told from a whiny, complainy point of view, which is, my mother locked me in a closet when I was 5 years old and nobody listened to me back then, so you're going to listen to me now. Or it was, I have learned this and you should learn this, which is, it's not what I want. And there are many wrong ways of sharing a story. And I think the many wrong ways of sharing the story have come about because of bad training.
Or no training.
But especially with my background in communications and help, I'm a neuro-linguistic programming practitioner. I know about I know how people take in communication. So it's our job as communicators to put it in a format that other people could take in the way we want them to. But at the same time, it's not about technique. Technique is very superficial. It's very manipulative. And so when I talk about inside out story, it's about it has to be real for you first. It has to come from the inside. And if you could do that, if you could access it and then layer on top of that, just enough technique that you need, not more, but just enough that you need to make sure that it's accepted in the spirit that it's intended, then that's what inside out storytelling. And there's a whole craft to that. And it's not about, people want simple solutions. It's not about, you just use this template and you'll be fine. Well, use this template and you'll sound like everybody else who uses the template, and use this template and you'll miss the most important part, which is your heart. Yeah, yes, I'm passionate about that.
Yes, you are. I love it. Okay, well, I totally forgot to look at the comments because I'm just like listening to you, and I want to make sure that we say hi to everybody who's watching. If you're watching and you haven't dropped us a line, please do that, because otherwise I won't see you and I won't be able to say hello. Michel, this now takes me to you traveling the world. I want to know all about that. I want to know how you got to travel all around the world to help all these different companies. And what has that got to do with business? We talked about that a little bit earlier.
We did.
Yeah.
So generally, when I started traveling the world as a speaker, it was on the platform of brand differentiation, which is what I was known for. What I did over the years, again, this is another way to answer the question of how has it changed me over time, is that I've shifted my own brand from differentiation to storytelling. Now here's the thing I don't say very often out loud to my professional clients, but I still do the same thing. back then, I would go in through the door of brand differentiation and I would come out with a story. Now, because storytelling is a buzzword, it's popular, and people recognize it as a valuable thing, I go in through the door of storytelling and I come out with differentiation. So, doesn't matter which way you go in. If you work with me, you're going to get both, because I believe they're intrinsically related. So, originally I would get hired and I'd travel to many parts of the world to help companies. And I love travel. I miss it right now, and I can't wait to get back at it. But yes, to help companies and individuals differentiate themselves through story, or create a platform for themselves based around their story, and thereby also benefit from differentiation. There's no any story, and this is not me, but in any story, any good story has what we call an inside story and outside story. Again, this is where inside out storytelling, comes from in part. Every story, every movie you see, every book you read, every play you go to, every good story has an inside story and an outside story that are told in parallel. Both stories are told in parallel. And the inside story reflects the personal transformation. The inside story reflects the human universal theme. And the outside story is really what makes it unique. Nobody has those set of facts, circumstances, scenario, environment. But when you put the two together, you have something that's truly compelling, that nobody else can tell. And you understand how the human story, the universal human story, which we all connect with, comes from the unique set of circumstances. It's like Shakespeare did the same thing. Why? You could ask yourself, what do we have in common with Danish, royalty and kingdoms and all the intrigue that goes behind the royal court there? And so how do we relate to it? But we all relate to the notion of what power does to us and how it corrupts us. We all relate to having to second guess our friends, and are they loyal to me or betraying me? We all deal with those universal themes. And what we do in that is we place ourselves in the story and say, well, I understand that I am not trying to be king, but I also understand, having been or what would I do in a situation where I don't trust the people who are closest to me? I don't know who's friend or foe, who's being Machiavellian to outsmart me, and what am I don't know who to. So that's what story is.
Yes.
It's the connection of those two things.
So in essence, the combination of your story inside and how it relates to the outer world is that combination that makes it unique.
That's correct. That's exactly it.
Yes.
I mean, every once in a while, I sit down and I try to think of, well, there must only be like 10 themes in the world. But I get lost because the subtlety of each theme makes it, is this a different theme, or is it, or, is this the same conflict that universal, or is this a variation of it? For example, we talked about the woman who's transgender. Really is about, it's a story about feeling comfortable in your own skin. It's a story about knowing who you are as a person. It's about being true to who you are as a person.
Yes.
Well, that's a universal theme that we hear over and over and over again at Mo Mondays. How come all the stories sound different? Well, they sound different because of the unique circumstances, mm-hmm. and because there's always a subtle flavoring to mm-hmm. that mm-hmm. universal conflict.
And also the perspectives.
Good point. And there's also the perspective that perhaps is what gives it that subtle flavoring. This spice versus this spice.
Yes. And so that makes the sky the limit.
Absolutely. And earlier you said it's entertaining, it's fun, it's motivating. And I told you I truly believe that if it doesn't have some humor in it, then you're not ready to share the story. If you can't laugh at yourself in that story, humor is such an important part, not only because it's a signal to yourself that you're ready to share the story, but it's also a signal to the audience that everything's going to be okay. It's a signal to the audience that, you're going to tell me this story about this falling into a pit, and you're going to leave me in the pit. Well, I don't want to hear that story. So being able to, it's like, look, and people say, I can't tell a story with humor in it. I can't inject humor into my story. It's not appropriate for humor. And I said, look, when my mother, 87 years old, was on her deathbed, and I said, Mom, what's the funniest thing that ever happened to you? And she thinks about it, and she looks at me, and she kind of like props herself up in her bed, and she says, well, in her French accent, well, we were at the camps. And I'm thinking, I asked you for a funny story. You're going to tell me about Auschwitz? And she sees she sees the wheels turning and the fuse going and the smoke coming out. Like she said, and she goes, yes, we were at the camps. And yes, if my mother could share a funny story about Auschwitz, then there is no story that can't benefit from a bit of humor.
So I don't know what your take is on this, but I feel like it's only when we can look at our story and everything that's happened, our stuff, and we can design to tell a story so that we make that stuff only a part of our journey. So that story is just a part of my journey. It's not my entire story. It's that only then can we step outside and even have a humorous perspective at our own journey. Whereas if we make that our entire story, then we're just so consumed by
then you leave people in the pit.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And then it follows the same model as any good marketing message. What you want to sell is the learning and the insight that you got from it, without beating people over the head with it. And so how do you craft your story so that becomes the natural outcome? And look what I could do now. It's the same thing as purchasing a product. And these are things that I couldn't do without purchasing, before I had the product or have gotten the training or have gotten the service. These are the outcomes, the positive outcomes of having gone through the experience that I did. And you don't have to go through the experience, because it could become a thought experiment for you, just like going to a movie is a thought experiment for what would I do in that situation. So your story, your mess, you've heard the thing, your mess is your message. Yes, your message.
I've never heard it actually that way. No, this is my first time. Your mess is your message. I love that. I think that's powerful.
It's not mine. I can't remember who said it, but you need your stuff. We'll come up. I'll tell you what. Call me after. We'll come up with something about your stuff. Your stuff should, I don't know. We won't brainstorm on live camera.
No, but you're right. Okay, so Michelle, I'm going to take a moment and say hello to everyone who's dropped us a line. Okay, Frida is my mama. She's always here. So hi, Mom. Sharon's here. Deborah Sweezy, another awesome person who allows people to tell their stories about stroke and fantastic platform. They're called Stroke TV Foundation. And Sarah J is here. Thank you, Sarah. Robert's here. Hello. He says, hi, Dela and Michelle. Hello, Robert. Thank you so much for, there's a lot of comments here. I don't have time to go through them though, because we want to still hear about your travels. Oh, and Marianne is here as well. And she says, hi. Okay. So I want to ask you this question. Are companies, big businesses, do they believe in the power of stories? Is there a resistance? And if so, what are some things that they need to be looking at?
Well, you've asked a very broad question. I can't stereotype all businesses in the same way. There's a continuum. Some are very much sold on it and some are not. And I don't care to educate the ones who are absolutely dead against it, because that's a waste of my energy. Very often when I'm working with my corporate clients, very often there's a little bit of resistance. And they say, well, people don't want to hear about that. Well, yes, they do. And I either bring them along or I don't. But typically they want to work with me because they already believe at least a little bit in the power of story. I work with a lot of startups who have to raise, many millions of dollars to fund their ventures. And there's always the origin story. In fact, I'm doing what we call a 6-week storytelling for business challenge. And so, you'll get out of this the 4 stories that every single business needs. One of them is the origin story. Not just why you do what you do, but why you do, how you do what you do. Because how... Yeah.
Wait a second. Not just why you do what you do, but why you do how you do what you do.
Right.
Did I say that correctly? Say that 10 times.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, this is so much a part of who I am and what I believe in and what I've seen to be true that it comes out of me just like this. But yeah, I why we do, how we do what we do, how we do what we do is where differentiation lives.
Mm-hmm.
And the story of why we do it that particular way is your origin story.
I love it.
So that's why it applies in business.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I recently worked with a company that ended up raising $10 million, at least in part of the messaging that I put together with them. And the founder was dead set at first of didn't want to talk about how, his backstory, and over time, now it's in a video on his homepage, because he saw the value in doing it. I worked with another startup company that ended up getting acquired by one of the largest companies in the world, and they did extremely well. And what we discovered was how they did what they did was entirely driven and influenced by their experiences in the Army, where they were developing similar technology for people in the field. And they realized that for it to be effective, not only did the technology have to be flawless, but it had the usability aspect of it had to be, because if it failed, if the people in the field couldn't deploy it, then it was just as bad as having buggy technology. And that informed absolutely everything they did. But they weren't talking about that. But oh my God, what a powerful story to share. For the founders to share, this is why we do this in this particular way.
Yes.
And they also got acquired, or they all, that's one of the reasons they got acquired, is because their story, their message became absolutely clear and differentiated from everybody else in their space. And pretty much every single one of my corporate clients come, whether they ask for it or not. I told you, they either come to me for story or they come to me for message and differentiation, but they're going to come out the same door. They come in that door, one of these two doors, but they come out the same door because that's what I do.
Yeah. Okay. So here I'm thinking, wow, so your message could be so good and your story could be so inspiring, and the reason why you do it is so important to you. But something as simple as how you do it. And that could make the difference between success or not so much success. So everybody can benefit from this. Everybody should learn how to tell their stories inside out and how to tell it. And so how is authenticity in relation to how you tell your story?
Authenticity is crucial. However, people misunderstand authenticity.
How's that?
Many people feel that authenticity means you have to divulge the darkest secret of your life. You have to cry. And if you could do that, you've told your story.
That's
and
what
that's
we believe.
that's not what authenticity is.
Okay, what is it? Tell us.
That's authenticity without the craft of communication. Perhaps. Yes, it's authentic, but don't leave me there. There has to, so yes, it has to be real. And that's why, the tagline that we used to use, and many licensees who run Mo Monday still use it, real people, real stories, real inspiration, because that's what it's based on. And it has to be real. Like, we're not talking about making it up, and we're not interested in allegories, and we're not, it has to be real.
You guys are real.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but authenticity is that real aspect of it, so that it has to be genuine. It has to be authentic. It has to be real. But it doesn't mean, you talked about your stuff isn't your whole story. Well, people equate the authenticity with your stuff.
All of it.
All of it. And that's, it's part of it for sure. But don't leave people there. There's way more to your story than that. Mm-hmm. And knowing what needs to be left in and what should be taken out, what's extraneous information that totally doesn't move the story forward, what is a trivial fact that you keep in because that's actually how it happened, but totally unnecessary, those get in the way. So very often we need, and I need this too, because we can't do this for ourselves. We need that other perspective to help us sift through the elements of the story. And these are the kinds of things that I teach. And certainly in a group environment, we all get, we give each other that feedback. But I also teach how to give and get feedback, which is another pet peeve of mine. People don't know how to give and get feedback.
So true. Often we're so afraid of it anyways.
We're afraid of it. And people think that, you ask them for their feedback and they become marketing experts.
Yes.
No, I don't want you. You're not a marketing expert. Just tell me how you personally respond. Dela, I think we're going way off topic. And
I agree. I mean, I could sit here and talk to you forever. But there's lots of people here, and I want to make sure we say thank you to them all. There's so many comments. Thank you so much, everybody. Sarah says, please write that sentence in the comment for us. Not only why you do what you do.
Yeah, well, if somebody wants to write this down, I'll repeat it, and somebody could transcribe it. It's not what you do. It's not why you do what you do. It's why you do how you do what you do. That's where your story is, and that's where your differentiation lives.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to actually display your email so that if people need to get in touch with you, they can email you.
How about instead of my email, because there's a contact form, you can put, if you put my website down, or the two websites, either Neray.com or momondays.com, either one, the contact form comes to me. And that would be, email is difficult to stay on top of.
All right. So we'll do Neray.com. How's that?
Sure.
Okay. Here we go. I'm going to display that for you.
And I think most people know about momondays.com. So that's.
Yes. Awesome. Wow. What a fantastic conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed this. So good. Okay, but I do want to give you a couple of more minutes to just finish us off with whatever you like before we leave.
I can only repeat some of the things that have already talked about. I think everybody in this room is already a fan of storytelling, that understands the value of storytelling. I truly believe there's no greater work to start with. That doesn't mean you end with it. It's your start. There's no greater work to start with than sharing your story. Now, here's where sometimes people don't see what this actually means. For you to share your story means you have to know your story. Means you have to dig deep enough into your story for you to gain the insights, the positive insights that came out of it. You know, there are stories that I'm still struggling with. Those are the stories I don't share because I haven't figured out the positive lessons from them. So that's what I would say. Learn to share your story, which means learn your story, which means learn what your story truly is. And by sharing that, you are truly going back to something we said right at the very start, truly doing your part to healing the world, to making the world a peaceful place.
Thank you, Michel. So good. You can reach Michel at Neray.com if you want to see how he can help you craft your story inside out. This has been such a fulfilling conversation, Michel. I want to thank you for being here. Thank you. Thank you for accepting my invitation to be on Dela's Voice.
Thank you for inviting me.
And for everyone who's been watching us today, I want to thank you for giving us your time and the comments and the love. I'm truly blessed. Until we meet again, my friends, this was another episode of Dela's Voice, hoping to spark your soul. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.